Hey, you're talking to Adam KUBOTA from POSTMODERN JUKEBOX, and you are listening to Recess with Spinelli.
You are listening to Recess with Spinelli here on WSPN, Saratoga Springs, New York, Hoxton FM, London, England, as well as the International Radio Festival and the New York State Music Blog. And today we are here with Adam KUBOTA, the bassist of POSTMODERN JUKEBOX here at the Palace Theater in Albany, New York. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thanks for having me. Good to be here in Albany.
So I understand you just came off of a pretty extensive tour in both Australia and New Zealand. Are you feeling the jet lag yet?
Last night I broke through and I slept for 10 hours, so I finally broke through the jet lag. But I got in on Sunday morning and I went straight to rehearsals, so no rest for the weary. But it was an amazing tour, and it's always like really magical to go down to New Zealand and go to Australia, and we were in Singapore and Malaysia, and it's just like a totally different experience than anywhere in the world. So yeah.
Actually, you're doing a pretty extensive tour worldwide from the Asian region, Oceania region, to North America now, and European later on. This is a full year tour?
Well, I like to think them as being, different tours. The way that POSTMODERN JUKEBOX works is that it's a collective of musicians. So it's not just like one band that's going out there and touring the world. It's a bunch of different bands, and a few different, many different singers, a few different instrumentalists and dancers. So actually, I'm the only one that carried over from the Australia-New Zealand tour into this North American tour, and it's because I have seniority, and I showed up on the first day, so I've been here the longest.
Actually, how many musicians rotate through the band?
Oh, geez. I mean, at this point, it's got to be, getting close to, I don't know, 40 or 50 touring musicians, but the amount of musicians that have been in those videos, I mean, it's over 100, I think. So, theoretically, we could be cycling through those, 100 musicians and singers, because they're all just so amazing and so versatile, and they're not just like great YouTube performers, but they've just been on the biggest stages, whether it be Broadway or American Idol. So, we're lucky to have sort of an embarrassment of riches in terms of talent, and people that are excited about doing this sort of kind of crazy mashup vintage world that we're in. We're sending out 2 bands at one time in Europe, coming up and starting in the end of February, beginning of March, and then finishing up in April. And we just have so many people. Last time we did almost a 4-month tour of Europe with a lot of people being there through the whole time, myself included. We have so many great people that we are actually sending out 2 bands at one time, and then we're going to do like this crazy Voltron thing, if you follow who Voltron was, but we're going to all probably come together, both casts, and play a mega show somewhere, like the big I call it the Voltron cast. We finally invested in this amazing set that just completely makes this immersive sort of vintage vibe. We just have this like the old school bandstands and some just really sort of old school Art Deco-y things. It feels like you're in a the movie set from from like the 20s or the 30s or something like that. It's totally beautiful, and it's the perfect backdrop for all this amazing talent and vintage goodness. We're trying to channel just that classic vintage party look. And if you come to our shows, I mean, that is really like, what we're going for. We're it's like that, the big party scene in the Baz Luhrmann Gatsby movie. We're just trying to, let people, sort of channel that age, a little bit of excess, maybe, some flapper dresses, some pearls, some suits, some spats, and just, really just create a vibe and be like the most perfect soundtrack with all these amazing musicians to create this awesome vintage party.
So you definitely get a lot of folks coming dressed up and interacting with the music rather than sitting down?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's probably more than a few cans of mustache wax, that make their way into our shows. But again, It's a happening. It's more than just a concert. Even if we have just a seated concert, there's always people that are just spontaneously hop up in the aisles, and maybe to the chagrin of the ushers that are there, but they're in the aisles, dancing and doing swing dance or something like that. And we have a big tap following as well, because we always include a tap dancer in our shows. So at any given show we do anywhere, the tap community is so strong that there'll usually be between 2 and 20 tap dancers that are there to hang out with our tap dancer. And Sarah Rice, she's our usual tap dancer. And then after the show, sometimes they'll do like a quick they do a shim sham, which is like kind of the sort of the international language of tap dancers. They all know how to do it, and they'll just do a shim sham. And it's so cool, for me to be able to be around just this whole other scene. It's a lot of like people that respect vintage classic arts, and they all come together under one roof at these PMJ shows, and it's just nice. There's a lot of cross pollination between the jazz instrumentalists, the people that are just into vintage looks, dressing a certain way, or into just the art of the period, all the dancers. So again, it's just all these really cool, interesting, creative people under one roof, and they just really enjoy who we are and the look that we put out and the sound that we put out, and that's what's great about a Postmodern Jukebox show.
So what about more of a vintage feel, either in music or aesthetics, initially drew you to this project and keeps you around?
In the U.S. and I think a lot of different places, is that when you learn to play a music instrument, you learn the classic art forms. And for me, and I know a lot of other people, it's classical music, but it's also jazz. So your teachers, they teach you about just the masters of jazz, from back in the day, whether that be Art Tatum or Duke Ellington or Miles Davis, or somebody from the Motown era, like a Marvin Gaye or Stevie Wonder or something like that. So having learned to play in this way, it's only natural that you'd want to sort of emulate those people that basically the forefathers that sort of taught you and taught your mentors how to play. But then there's the added element of adding in songs that your contemporaries know. And I think that's always was a little bit of a crisis for myself, and I know also for Scott Bradley. It's like, well, what do you do if your heart wants to play in these old classic styles? I mean, some of the most masterful musicians of all time. But then it's like your peers, they're not really that into it because they don't understand why you like something that's so old. So what you do is you take something that your peers know and you play it in a style that you like, so you can get them to come and hang out and have a good time.
So you would definitely say then that Postmodern Jukebox is making jazz, some more vintage sounds, a little bit more accessible to a younger audience without that academic flavor to it?
That is one of my favorite things about this project, is that we are putting a whole generation of people, people that are watching a lot of YouTube, spending a lot of time on social media, just a younger generation of people. We're teaching them about classic art forms. And the biggest compliment that I ever get when I'm doing this is when I get messages on my Facebook fan page saying that, hey man, because of you, I started picking up the upright bass. I think it's so cool. Please tell me what type of bass that I should buy, and so. And that's a huge compliment, and it feels like I'm doing important work. just getting more people involved in this type of music, and then it maybe because they read Postmodern Jukebox, they'll know that some of this arrangements that we do are influenced by Duke Ellington, and then what they'll do is they'll look up Duke Ellington, and they'll find out about some of his music, and they'll find about the musicians that play with him, like Johnny Hodges or Juan Tizol or something like that, and so that's great. I mean, when I was a young man and I was learning to play jazz, I like ska music a lot because they were playing the same instruments that I played in jazz band, and because I like ska, I was sort of finding out about John Coltrane and Miles Davis and all these other legends.
Actually, going a little bit of history and how postmodern came to be popularity-wise, briefly. I understand that you've been with Scott since roughly 2002, but postmodern came around later, of course, then got the popularity through a lot of YouTube exposure. So in your eyes, how has things changed for the good due to technology?
Oh, I mean, I think that's really, really important because before we were doing YouTube, I mean, back in 2002, 2003, Scott and I and Ben, the sax guy, who's part of Postmodern Jukebox, we were, Scott always had this aesthetic of let's play a jazz song and then we'll throw in a Van Halen, or we'll throw in the theme to The Simpsons or Family Guy or something like that. So it was always a mashup for him, and we did a lot of gigs like that through we were living in Connecticut and also like in New York City, and then once Scott sort of wrapped his head around YouTube and viral videos, and what it would take to the type of work, the type of consistency to create viral hits, that is when the game completely changed for us. And Scott kept just throwing stuff at the wall, and it would, eventually more and more of it would stick. And before we had Postmodern Jukebox, he did something called a Motown tribute to Nickelback, and because that was our first sort of viral hit. We had about 300,000 views in the space of a month, and that was getting pretty big. But once it was in 2013 that he did Thrift Shop, and we got 1 million views in the space of a month, a couple months, and we were getting emails and calls from folks all over, be like, hey, you want to play our New Year's Eve gig in Dubai, or people were sort of thinking, oh, like, when are you guys going to go out and tour? And the funny thing is that we actually didn't really do a live gig together. I mean, we rarely did like public live gigs, like only in small places in New York City, until about 2014. So we spent about 2 years, a year and a half, just sort of, sort of percolating stuff on YouTube and getting viral hits and sort of figuring out the formula before we took it and made a live show out of it. But once that happened in 2014, man, I have just been touring like constantly since then, and I live on a tour bus, more often than I don't live on a tour bus. But that said, like, I spent 4 months all over Europe, from Spain to Moscow to Sweden to Scotland, to all these places, and again, the down under and North America, and it's just and we get called to do private gigs in all corners of the earth. So it's been a real game changer, YouTube, because you're just building your fan base, like wherever YouTube reaches, which is everywhere, and I'm really happy. I'm always surprised when I can be someplace. I was like in Stockholm, Sweden one time, and I was getting a coffee, and people just walk up to me and go like, hey, like you're Adam from Postmodern Jukebox. I'm like, yeah. It's like just really kind of trippy to me that like somebody in Sweden just like knows who I am.
Well, we're looking forward to your show here at the Palace Theater in Albany, New York. But before we head out, are there any final thoughts? Anything else you would like to add? Yeah,
I mean, just to get back to where we are with YouTube. I mean, we have over 500 million views, on collectively, in our videos now, and it's just it's growing and growing. Scott has several million subscribers to that, so it's just amazing to me, how many people out there in the world have seen Postmodern Jukebox, and I'm just really excited for what the future holds, and I can't wait to come back to Europe, in the spring, and some of our biggest fans are out there in the UK and all over Europe, so it's going to be great.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You have been listening to Recess with Spinelli here on WSPN, Saratoga Springs, New York, Hoxton FM, London, England, International Radio Festival, and the New York State Music Blog. And we have been speaking with bassist Adam KUBOTA of POSTMODERN Jukebox.
I'm gonna pop some tags, only got $20 in my pocket. I'm hunting, looking for a come up. This is freaking awesome.